Hello, it's Johnny here. What is the most epic battle you can think of in a movie franchise? For me, there's only one choice, and that is the Battle of Helms Deep from the second Lord of the Rings trilogy, The Two Towers. Now, if you haven't seen the movie yet, what the heck are you doing here? Do whatever it takes, grab the DVD and watch the movie because it's the best movie ever. If you have seen it, well, you're in the right place. Because today we're going to do something pretty cool. We're going to relive the battle, but flip it around and be the Uruk Hai commander. And I'm going to approach the strategy with the goal, of course, in conquering Helm's Deep. And we're going to make some adjustments. As you know in the movie, they got nearly there, but then they got destroyed by a Rohan counterattack. We ain't going to let that happen this time. So sit back and enjoy this because dang, these animations took me absolutely hours. So Saruman, what do I need to do again?
Leave none alive!
Got ya. Well, the landscape is iconic, so I won't go too much into it, but you see the main fortification on the right. There's a deeping wall, which is like this much smaller wall that protects and blocks the valley. There's the stream that cuts underneath the deeping wall, which is a weak point for explosives. And on the left side is much higher ground, where there is a ramp to go from the high ground into this depression that leads into the fortification known as the Hornburg or Helm's Deep. And Helm's Deep itself is leaning at the back of a mountain, and there is something called the glittering caves that leads into the mountains where the civilians are hiding and pretty much defenseless. I'm basing this on the movie, not the book, which has significant differences. Like in the books, there were no elves on the Western forces, and there was also an additional defense, the Deeping Dyke. And obviously it's a fantasy world with plot armor and invincible heroes. Sorry, how dare. The Uruk Hai commander, me in this case, would probably have seen the maps of the castle, and when arriving at the defenses, be quite confident. It appeared to have minimal barriers on the front, including the ramp, which is a terrible mistake from Rohan, and no drawbridge. Forces of the west had their backs to the walls, literally. Heavy rain also doesn't favor archers, shortening their range and visibility, with my main concern being that I might struggle to light the fuse of my gunpowder. If we had time, for example, if we had the option to consider a siege, I would have built a fortified encampment. I would certainly have designated a medical camp and a supply camp, and I would have given time for my troops to rest with some food and water.
Looks like meat's back on the menu!
I can see why the Uruk Hai fought through simple, overwhelming force. Hitting on all fronts to spread the defenders' attack would look compelling, and it nearly worked, but it didn't, so let's correct that. Let's first explore the stat line. The book said there were over 3,000 defenders and no elves, but this is about the movie. There were references about 300 Rohan defenders, but there definitely were a bit more on screen to defend the main keep, so I suspect they had probably 500 plus, perhaps through conscription. Elves also came in late, and it's unclear how many, with some people saying about 500. I counted at least 200 plus behind the deeping wall and at least 350 on the wall itself. For the Uruk Hai, there were no other types of orcs or allied humans, unlike in the book, and the movie referenced the figure of at least 10,000. But I actually think there's a bit more than that, given how they filled up the field. In the book, it was about 20,000. But you know, Uruk Hai are badasses, they're fresh, but not experienced, heavily armored, not scared of sunlight. That's probably good enough muscle. Within my force, I would expect officers that led companies, mostly armed with swords and shields, with some pikes, siege ladders, ballistas, and our gunpowder teams. Phase 1. Positioning. Western forces have assigned elves to the deeping wall, and on the wall itself there were 3 deep, and behind it they had further archers for support. The forces of men were mainly on the main fortress with no cavalry aside from the king's personal guard, but their horses were in the stables. With the clock ticking to move in quick, I would engage, but not quite like in the movies. I would divide my forces into waves to avoid overcrowding. People need space to get the ladders in place, plus you risk crushing your own men and be easy target practice for archers. We aren't trying to have a rave here. I would also organize my troops well out of archer range, not just stand in front of their line of sight. If I had more time, I might have wasted opponents' arrows with probing attacks to also test their strength. I would have assigned most of my forces to the deeping wall, with the other forces pointing towards the main gate through the ramp. There's no point packing the ramp with my troops, given the target practice potential and because I don't want my men to fall over the edge. I would also want to protect my flanks, with a detachment of reserve force positioned on the high ground in case enemy reinforcements do come. Plus it's good policy to have forces and scouts with high visibility of the battle and beyond. There would be an agreed signaling system across all forces, and particularly for those troops stationed at the top in case of enemy approach. Rogue Riders would have been ideal if I had them as scouts. I would position my pikes there too, alongside the flanks. I wouldn't have my first wave armed with pikes. Have you ever tried to carry a ladder and a pike? It's damn difficult. They aren't particularly useful. The weapons aren't long enough to attack the deeping wall defenders, and it would be really awkward using them alongside the ladders. Phase 2. Initial wave. Now the deeping wall defenses are poorly designed. They don't have a lot of arrow slits, and the walls don't actually cover the full height of an elf or a human being. And so they're really vulnerable for archer fire, and that's why I will also bring in an attachment of crossbowmen to shoot at them and thin their numbers. I like the idea of using the ballistas to lift up ladders onto the main keep, but I actually would have used them much earlier as a siege weapon first, using and taking out the archers on the deeping wall. Within that, I'll move in my main deeping wall battle group. The objective of the first wave is to tie up the deeping wall defenders. I like the use of the berserkers on top of the ladders. Whether that's actually possible in real life, I'm not so sure. I would armor them up. The role of berserkers is not to kill everyone, it's to stay alive, tie up defenders, and allow the others to get up that wall. In conjunction, I would move up to the ramp too, given there's no obstacles to slow me down. We want to make our defenders fight on all fronts and spread their defenses. The key difference though, is that I would split my gunpowder. I don't need a battering ram if I can just blow the out of it. I would only use a bit for the main gate. I don't want to smash the ramp to pieces. The fact that defenders did not do that themselves is their mistake. However, I would probably have sent a smaller force first to test the strength of the ramp in case it was a trap. I can't afford to lose my valuable gunpowder. In theory, under the cover of the shield wall, including having the shields actually protecting my sides, my sappers could just get there to the front gate, ignite it and blow it up. Although I'll probably lose a company of Uruk Hai in the process. For the main gate, now that it's open, I would also charge my forces up. I would simultaneously also launch the major siege ladders up via my ballistas, with numerical superiority overwhelming the defenders like the movie. For the deeping wall, once my troops around the deeping wall river is fully engaged, I would blow that up too, and hope Legolas would still mess up. And the 3/4 of munitions I had left should be enough. The smaller explosion might avoid killing too many of my own troops. That's the signal for the second wave, who up till now were in reserve safely behind archer range. They would charge forward. If I had the choice, I would have the front line with pikes to help fend off elven archers, but the priority is just to get in there, because we don't want elves to guard the choke point. Now, if I was the western forces at this point, I would immediately withdraw all my forces at the deeping wall, and not do a crazy suicide charge. Given that I failed to plug the massive hole. Once the explosion happened in the main entrance, similarly I would retreat on the main fort and reunite with the deeping wall forces at the glittering caves and defend that single choke point till the end and buy time. On my side, since the elves chose to engage, I would order my forces to choke off the deeping wall forces by sieging the back entrance and preventing the subsequent retreat. Ideally, I would breach that entrance too, perhaps using the battering ram that I didn't use for the main ramp. Hopefully I'll be able to surround the surviving deeping wall forces and wipe them out. By cutting off the deeping wall forces, I might have also destroyed the main characters Aragorn and Legolas, and Gimli. And that means Legolas won't be able to shoot down one of my huge ladders too, so that's a 2-in-1 for me. I want to flood the main entrance with troops like in the movie. Western forces would retreat pretty fast to the caves, losing most of their men, especially since they didn't fortify the entrance to the inner keep. If I had any spare explosives, I would blow the final door to pieces, otherwise I'd use the battering ram. And once breached, I'm pretty sure any counterattack by a dozen horses would never make it to the ramp in the real world. Throughout this battle, I might cycle my exhausted frontline companies with fresh troops to allow my forces to rest and not have a bunch of guys standing around all night being bored. Those injured would get treatment and basically get out of the way of the battle. Phase 4, the Rohan counterattack. By this point, as dawn approaches, my scouts would have reported rapid movements of 2,000 Rohan cavalry coming in. There's no way I would meet them on open ground, but if I did have most of my troops intact, 2,000 horses would not have been particularly worrying, but the wizard might have been a bit scary. Now, the climb up to meet them ground would be too steep, especially depicted by the movies. Instead, I would refortify Helms Deep and use their defenses against them. The ground would be filled with dead bodies and arrows and nearly impossible to move at pace. It would be very difficult for the cavalry to charge quickly in that kind of battlefield. If I had time, I would withdraw my reserve troops from the top. If I didn't, they might be wiped out, but buy time for my men to reorientate our defenses, as well as put my crossbowmen on the battlements ready for their engagement. Horsemen are not the right troops to attack the Hornburg, so if they did charge down, even with their temporary wizard light, they would most likely be wiped out. They don't have enough to lay siege and would probably sally out if they attempted anyway. Now the one proviso is that we don't know what the Ents will do. The Ents in the extended edition of the movie actually attacked the retreating Uruk Hai in the forest, but would they actually come out of the forest in the way that they attacked Saruman? If they do attack out of the forest, hey, all bets are off. I don't know if I'm equipped to deal with these guys. I don't have any fire, everything's wet from the rain. I'd probably retreat to the Hornburg, use my pikes to defend, and maybe I'll put up a good fight and take them out. Or find a way to retreat up the hill. But regardless, not running into the forest is probably a good idea, and I probably wouldn't run into the forest if I had won the battle itself. And there you go, victory. Smashed it, well done. With probably a lot less casualties. Probably would have ruined the entire storyline. Is there any other additions that would have resulted in a quicker victory or less casualties? Let me know, I'd love to hear. And if you are interested in this kind of slightly different style of video, then please like this video, share it out, and subscribe for this channel. Thank you very much.